Here.
Dave Crisafulli.
Here.
Pamela Dowd.
Here.
Lisa Glidden.
Here.
James Hensy.
Here.
Sean Amek.
Here.
Heidi Sweeney.
Here.
Student Rep Maura Dempsey. At this time, if you would join me in the Pledge of Allegiance, please. I pledge allegiance to the flag of the United States of America and to the republic for which it stands, one nation, under God, indivisible, with liberty and justice for all. Thank you. There are no speakers for tonight. Then we will move to the Board of Education. Item A, revision of the 22-23 instructional calendar. If I could have a motion, please.
Make the motion.
Second.
Second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next on the agenda is the superintendent's report with Dr. Calvin.
Good evening, Board. I think what we're going to do is a group of us are going to go to the tables and talk from the table tonight, okay? Okay, can this on? Set? Okay, great. All right, so we're going to go ahead and get started this evening. Tonight, we want to share some information with the board. From our last meeting, we talked a little bit about information that we wanted to certainly bring back. But before we do, I think we want to start out by doing some congratulations and highlighting of some great things that have been occurring across the district. First, I want to highlight our marching band. I want to congratulate them on their 43rd Pageant of Champions that was held October 1st. 9 school districts participated in this year's pageant, and job well done by our students. So we certainly want to congratulate them on another fantastic pageant for sure. So sure, round of applause for the kids. Absolutely. Also want to highlight the Rachel's Challenge, Oswego High School Chain Reaction that just recently happened on the 27th and 28th. We had nearly 200 students this year from the high school that participated. And then as they're in the training session, they leave, and it's like a chain reaction. They begin to share the things that they have learned through the training piece. The chain reaction activity is a transformational day of a lot of fun for our kids. It's a day of reminding them of what it means to be leaders. It's a day of empowerment, and the goal is to encourage the participants to view others as valuable and to, make sure that we treat each other kindly, respectfully, and void out bullying wherever possible at the high school level for sure. Again, it focuses on bullying, violence, and alienation as well. Through a variety of games, trust-building activities, and presentations, participants learn to view one another's and also themselves in a very positive manner. Rachel's Challenge is a non-for-profit organization that's dedicated to equipping and empowering students and adults to sustain a positive culture in their school and environment and their communities. And also the goal is to, by starting a chain reaction of kindness and compassion, it will change lives with students, basically. The program, by the way, just some background, was developed out of recognition of the life of the writings of Rachel Scott, who was the first student killed in the Columbine shooting back in April 20th of 1999. So our students, I have to tell you, did a fantastic job. I know that a number of us were there to view and to see, I think pretty much most of us were there to see what was going on throughout the day at different times, and our students just did a fantastic job. So we're really excited about the work that's happening with Rachel's Challenge at the high school. Also, we have a new initiative that's in place. It's called Read to Them. Read to Them promotes personal and academic success in reading, particularly. The goal is to make sure that we encourage our children to read wherever possible. And also, we want adults to join in this whole literacy process. We've received a grant from RTT to support one school and one book. So there are different books throughout the year that the kids will be reading with the school staff, with parents at home. And we've started already. It's been great. Last week we were in doing observations in classrooms just to see how things are going. And the number of classrooms that have really brought this first book, 8 Class Pets Alive, is just really fantastic. I think you'll really enjoy that. And by the way, board, if there are any of you all who would like to come in and read children, let us know, because we have classrooms that would love to have board members in to read to kids. So if you'd be interested, let us know. We'd love to have you come and join us for sure. Okay. So now we're going to just shift gears and come back to our last board meeting. The last meeting, we talked a little bit about study information that we would bring back before the board this evening. And so we want to just kind of go through each of the pieces of information tonight that we have for you. So this will be a 2-part piece. We'll do a little bit this week, and then at our next board meeting, we'll bring back the next portion, okay? So tonight, first we're going to start out by talking about labor relations information. How would this, if there was a change with repurposing of Layton, how might that affect our staff? And so we'll talk a little bit about that. The second is real estate information. There were some questions about whether or not we're going to have a good bunch of kids coming to us because of some of the new real estate development that's happening across the city. So we want to share a little bit about that. We've spent a lot of time on the phone working with local realtors, working with the city, and one of our local legislators works a lot on the development piece and had some great conversations, about what's happening with respect to the real estate. So we'll share that tonight. We want to talk a little bit about our current enrollment and our current average class sizes. So I know that at our last meeting, there was some conversations about the study. Just so we, again, are clear, the information that's in the study was not the current class size data. That's the one from last school year. So we're going to share with you where we're at this year, okay, and let you see where we're at. I think the board shared that when we come back and talk about the class sizes that, the field that we want to kind of look at is where we're at right now, right? That was is that the right word I want to use, field, or the launching pad, the threshold, thank you. The threshold that we want to think about is right, where we're at currently today. So we'll share a little bit about that. And then we have information back from our thought exchange, and we'll go through that and share those details with you as well. At our next meeting, we'd like to come back and talk more about class sizes for the next school year. And then we'll talk a little bit about quite a bit actually, about redistricting. What would that look like? Tom will be joining us from transportation to show us the maps of the city and what that would appear like. And then we will, by that time, have back information from our community focus group. We have people who are applying for the focus group, and that's great. So hopefully by that time, we'll have all that information compiled. And then the building condition survey information. Now, with respect to that, we're going to try to get that in before October ends. We have spoken with the architects and asked them to try to get that to us as soon as they can. We believe we'll get it back before the end of October. I'm not sure if we'll have it for the meeting or we may have to call another meeting, but we'll let you know as soon as we know once that information is back. But we'll have all those pieces done for the board as we shared at our last meeting. Okay? All right, so we're going to go ahead and get going here. So I think first we want to start out with the labor relations data. We have looked very closely at the data to see if there was a need to repurpose, what would the staffing look like? There'd be concerns, and so as I've shared in the past, I know what the study has said. Like they've shared that if we needed to move forward with the repurposing of Layton, that we might want to look at about 11 teachers. I'm not having them. My feeling is that's a little too deep for us. I would not go that far. However, we did want to make sure we looked at, if this were to happen, what would the staffing look like? So if we were to make a change, just to be clear, our goal is to make the changes through attrition, right? We are clear that we can do whatever needs to be done through attrition. So, right now what we have in the system is 20 teachers with 30 years of service credit and that are at the age of 55. So what we did was we went with the top tier, the 30 years folks, right? We know that we, by the way, also have people in our system that have maybe 20 years here, 26 years here, but they have experience in other places, other districts, right? So we wanted to be careful, but we looked at those who were 30 years and above in our system already, that we have 10 elementary teachers, if I'm correct, Bob?
Yes, we have 10 elementary teachers and 10 secondary.
Right. So 10 elementary, 10 secondary, who could go at any moment, at any time. We already have one now that we know is getting ready to go right away because, well, they're ready, right? It's retirement, right? And then we looked at the CSEA data. When we looked at that, what we saw was we had 11 CSEA members with 30 years of service credit and that are at age 55. And then with respect to AAP and non-affiliated members, COASA, basically, we know that we have 3 people in that category. So we have 2 AAP members and then 1 non-affiliated member. So clear to us that if we were or needed to make the repurposing happen, right, this would happen through attrition. Our goal is to make sure that we maintain our program, work diligently, with our students, but we're clear that we could do it through attrition. Bob, is there any other information you want to add to that at all?
I think you covered it. I think that the main thing with so you have 2 groups of retirees in New York State. You have a TRS, New York State Teachers Retirement, and then the other bucket, per se, is the employees' ERS retirement system. So your CSEA falls under the ERS, and then our OCTA group and our AAP and non-affiliated, as well as COASA, falls under the New York State Teachers Retirement System. So those are the 2 state retirement systems that we're talking about. And these are projections, and these are numbers that we know of are true, that these are people that have the number of years experience as well as the age minimum requirement.
Right. And again, we just went with the top tier, 30 years plus. Some of these people have been here higher than 30 years already, okay? All right.
They're all eligible to retire.
That is correct. All eligible, yes, ma'am.
Yep.
Yes, okay. All right. The second piece of data that we found, or that we kind of went through and did some research on, was the real estate information data. And to do so, again, we reached out to folks from the community to make sure that we had the right information. So I'm just going to run down and tell you what we found, basically. So the first, we have these new properties that have been all built up lately, and we'll just go through them. The first one is the Latatro property, located in the downtown area. Kind of stands for luck is the ability to realize, to be recognized, to recognize opportunity. It is a locally owned and operated facility that features retail, upscale commercial spaces, 20 luxury apartments, underground parking for those 20 apartments, and it has some restaurants there and world-class eats on the rooftop deck, which is complete with a stunning view of the city and the river. The costs for the apartments range between $1,300 to $2,750, right? They have, several 1-bedrooms and several 2-bedrooms, but again, only 20 luxury apartments. At this point in time, Latatro's pretty taken. There are no children that we are right now picking up or bringing back and forth from that particular entity, from that place, okay? That's the first one. The second is Riverwalk, not too far from that, the first place there. Riverwalk Apartments and Restaurants are locally owned and veteran-owned as well. It features a 4-story mixed-use hub. Riverwalk showcases 32 luxury waterfront apartments, and underground parking, and an oven-fired pizza restaurant and handmade bagel shop on the first floor. The apartments, range from $1,480 to $2,340. Again, there are no children living currently in the facility. It's pretty well occupied at this time, and there is no, at this time, we have no feedback from those who are in charge of the organization that they're expecting children to move into that place, that location. Both of these locations, so we have engineers from the power plant, professors, doctors, folks, who are kind of in those kind of careers for the most part are in both of those, living in those areas, okay? Then we have Lock 7. Lock 7 is new and actually was on the newspaper here just recently, a couple days ago. It is a DePaul Property Incorporated. For folks who are not familiar with DePaul specializes in mental health, homelessness, and providing supportive services for the elderly as well. And DePaul creates and operates attractive, affordable housing solutions in urban, suburban, and rural settings, with environments that promote respectful community relationships. All the units are subject to income eligibility and occupancy requirements. There are a total of 80 units in the Lock 7 apartments. 40 of the units are for those who meet the low-income tax credit program apartment requirements. 34 of those apartments are one-bedroom apartments, and 6 of them are two-bedroom apartments. And then there's another 40 apartments that are available. 34 of these 40 are one-bedroom, and 6 are two-bedroom apartments. And those 40 have a housing specialist that's attached to those apartments that help to teach, skills and to assist tenants with community services. 20 of these units are ADA accessible. 4 of these units are, hearing and vision, accessible. So in order to get into that 40, there's a specific health criteria that must be met. Folks have to have needs around supportive services. Many of the folks in this area, or in this particular place, and you'll find this in the newspaper article as well, they are in need of some supports. Many of the folks are homeless or facing homelessness, and or senior citizens that are what are considered, the term in the industry, are fragile, need supports because of the fragile situations that they're facing. So you can see there on the side what the rent pretty much looks for if you meet those criterias. What we believe is that from talking with the folks who are in charge of the agency and the property, we may see about 10 students coming from this particular facility. We already know that there are 5 students now who actually are living in the facility. Those students are not new students to our district. What they are students that just moved into the property, basically. And that was as of this morning, that we had an update again, just to make sure we were on the right page. Okay.
Are all their units rented out?
I believe that they are in the process of being rented out, right? And I know that there is a waiting list, from what I was told, because of the criteria that's there. I believe some of the places actually have lotteries, and I believe DePaul has a lottery system that's going. So for the most part, to answer your question, if they're not in there now, they're in the process of they're on the wait list to be in there, yes. Okay. The next place is the East Lake Commons. And East Lake Commons is a 5-story building for income-qualified families and individuals with 70 residential units. Apartments are subject to a lottery system, again, similar to the last property. And availability is income-based, where gross income must be equal to or less than 50, 60, or 80% of the area median income. So they have 46 one-bedroom apartments that range from $630 to $975, and 24 two-bedroom apartments ranging from $740 to $1,167. What we are hearing from them as well is that at most we may see about 10 children that would be going into that particular property. And they do have, as I said, a lottery system that they've been going through, right, to be able to determine who's coming in and who's going out, basically. The next property is Harbor View. And Harbor View Square is a $29.2 million mixed-income, mixed-use revitalization project on Oswego's waterfront. The transformational development includes a 5-story structure containing 57 rental units of modern, high-quality, and urban living spaces. There is a 2-story structure with 18 townhomes as well, and there is about 10,000 square feet of retail commercial space in the Harbor West neighborhood. So there's a total now of 75 units, 57 are rentals, and then 18 are rental apartments, and then 18 are townhomes. Rental units are from $655 up. Townhomes cost was not available as we were trying to work with the folks and gain information. What we know at this point in time from all of our data is that we currently have 31 children who attend our schools who live in Harborview. It's been around for a little while, so we know we currently have 31 children there. Right? Okay.
So it's the townhomes that have been open for a while. The bigger building with the 57 units in it, I think just came online, opened earlier this year. Are they all rented? Do we have that information?
I don't know if they're all rented, but what I do know is that's what they have available. And that's the number of kids that we've been transporting. Actually, when you kind of go back from last year to this year, it's been between 28 to 31 kids. And we know today we have 31 for sure. Okay, sure. The next piece is the Champlain Commons. And Champlain Commons has been open for 3 years. It's located in the town of Scriba. It's overseen by the agency OCO, and the community is operated under low-income housing tax credit program. And this program is designated to facilitate the housing needs of moderate to low-income individuals and also families. And you know, they have, again, the income pieces there. You can see there in terms of what the costs are per the different apartments. And utilities are also included in the rents. We found that information as well. And the district currently has 28 students who've been attending who live in this particular property. And again, it's been there for a couple years. That number really hasn't fluctuated that much, but we currently have 28. Okay. The big thing that we heard across the board is that many of the children many of our kids, it's not that they are coming from out of town, out of state. They're just moving from within the city, basically, or from within the county. That's kind of what we've heard for the most part. So, when we kind of look at the summary of projections and who might be coming, what we know is that the first two, there really are no projections for children at this time. Lock 7 has about 10. 5 students are already there. East Lake Commons, 10 is the estimate. Harborview Square, 31 are already enrolled at our district. Champlain Commons, 28. So we have 79 is the projected number from all of those, and 64 of those students are already enrolled in our district, right? These are not newer people coming. They're already here, basically, for the most part. Now, with that, I always want to make sure I leave some room for growth. Who knows what will happen 4 or 5 years down the road? But you can see the number of apartments that are available. There isn't, in terms of 2-bedroom apartments, you don't see 200, 300 apartments available, which is typically where you'll find, families with 1 or 2 or 3 kids. You find very few 2 or 3-bedroom apartments available throughout the whole city. Okay. Any questions before we move on? All right, so now we're just going to talk a little bit about our current enrollment, what we see in the district. Now, Beds Day is coming. However, we just wanted to share for tonight where we're at as of right now. And Beds Day, I believe, is it this week, if I remember correctly? Tomorrow. So here's where we're at as of today. The purpose of this data report is to provide some useful evidence to advance the Board of Education's decision-making process. So I wanted to just kind of go through, if I could, and share the different studies that have been done. So actually, I misspoke. I said that there were 7 or 8 studies done. There was actually 12. We have all 12 of the studies here, and I believe that you all have all copies of all the information that we have, basically. So over the years, starting all the way back, to like 1997, we've had a number of studies done. In 2012, we had Oswego County BOCES come in and do a study. They analyzed enrollment trends and 5-year projections. They looked at reconfiguration, and then also the findings showed that K through 12 enrollment for 2001 to 2012 was going to be decreasing by about 1,058 students. So down from 5,010 to 3,953. In January of 2012, Dr. Chris, the superintendent of the school at that time, had a study commissioned and done. It was analyzed. They analyzed the full redistricting to balance being enrollment by realigning the district's boundaries. And then in December of 2010, the Office of Professional Research and Development at Syracuse University, they came in and they looked at the concern, and in their study, they did a meta-analysis where they looked at studies that were done prior to them being there. And a report was conducted to help the Board of Ed with making decisions on possible reconfiguration of schools, district elementary, and also, final disposition of the education center as well. In January 2010, the district reconfiguration committee completed a study, and they talked about reutilizing Layton School as a possible 9th grade annex. The elementary grade reconfigurations were looked at, and the consideration of closure for the Ed Center. In 2009, we had OCD Reconfiguration Committee. They did work on, again, repurposing or reutilizing of Layton. Talked about housing all UPK classes at Layton. Charles E. Riley and Minetto would function as the grade 3 through 6, and then KPS, FPS as grade K through 2. There was some work around selling the Ed Center, and then also utilizing a portion of Layton for high school PE and athletics and or alternative high programs. March of 2007, there was a reconfiguration committee that studied this concern again, and they focused on balancing class sizes across elementary schools, grade reconfigurations, focusing on transient student populations, and since there is clearly declining enrollment, at that time, they shared that it would be fiscally responsible to reduce the number of elementary schools. The model suggested one closing, and they considered 2 other buildings, KPS and Fitzhugh Park. In November 2007, again, a reconfiguration committee with Kathleen Chamberlain, and they talked about reconfiguring schools and closing Minetto. In April 2006, SUNY Oswego issued an analysis grade configuration report, and they talked about, also they included parents in a survey to ask them to rate factors that affected students and class sizes and teacher choice and tax levy, travel to schools, neighborhoods, a number of items there. In November of 2016, Oswego County BOCES, Kathy Chamberlain, talked about the declining enrollment issue again. She shared how from 2001 to 2006, they went from 5,010 students down to 4,605, and then declining enrollment. She gave some projections from 2006 to 2011, and it was an open-ended survey also offered for teachers in the community. In 2005, Krista Construction, they talked about the Ed Center and gave some scenarios, and there's some scenarios they talked about repurposing, relocating of Frederick Layton School, constructing new facilities, and relocating and leasing space at the existing remaining school. Finally, you had 2 more studies there. There was the reconfiguration committee in 2002 that came together, and they explored elementary grade level configurations. They looked at current research, and they suggested the future, they talked about exploring K through 8 models. And then in 1997, OSD redistricting committee explored literature, research, and case studies on trends, grade configurations, and class sizes. They reviewed current research that there is no elementary grade level configurations that's better than another, they found, and having fewer students in grade sections can be difficult to justify and render a school district vulnerable to criticism regarding the ability of providing quality instruction programs and supportive services. So you've had a plethora of studies that have occurred 12 times now, basically, to share. And then when facilities or efficiency studies began, just to be clear, the student enrollment was at 5,370 in 1996, 1997. Student enrollment has declined by 1,856 students, 1,856 students to 3,514 as of today. Here's where we're at now. So again, when you think about the themes of the studies, on 4 studies there were concerns around specific enrollment trends, the decline in enrollment. There were 9 studies on grade reconfigurations, 1 study on building boundary adjustments, 4 studies on reutilizing or repurposing of latent and closing an elementary building, 4 studies on closure of the education center, and 2 studies with the community, trying to figure out what and decipher what parents and teachers value in education. So here's where we're at today. When we look at kind of where we were before. So today, right now, we have 3,514 students as of today. If you go with adding in our UPK numbers, that's another 125 students. That goes to 3,639. There's a reason why we separated that tonight. We just wanted to be clear. So on your tables, I believe I have a paper there with a graph. Let's see if I can find the graph. You have a couple different graphs there. So you have one that's smaller with the yellow line. Do you see that there in front of you? And then you have another one that deals with 7 through 12 enrollment and 9 through 12 enrollment. So if you kind of just take this one here, just wanted to be clear. As we went back through the studies, one of the things that we noticed was that, just from this document here is a great piece. This is from the CRIS study. I believe it was back in 2010 or 12, if I remember correctly. So you'll notice they gave you actual enrollments and then projected enrollments. And during that time frame when they were studying, they were looking at K through 12 numbers, right? Do you see that there in the paper, right? And since that time, we've begun to add in other people into this number. Our UPK has been added into this number, right? So the state now requires that you tell them how many UPK students that you have, because there's monies that go to those UPK programs, right? So back then, they didn't have to include the UPK number, and they had, 5,000 or more, right? And today, we are including the number. But if you pull that number out and compare, so we're comparing apples to apples and oranges to oranges, right? Our numbers are actually, you pull it out, right? You'll see the difference with respect to the enrollment, right? So today, we are at 3,639 total with the 125 UPK. But actually, if we went with the model that they used years prior, right, we're actually at 3,514, okay? With that, we also have other students that we work with, and some we don't. Our homeschool students, we know that there are 200 of those students. Our non-public school students, 157. Our out-of-district students that we do not service, 60. And then we have preschool students, CPSE, 53 as well. So let's look at where we're at currently in terms of class sizes and sections. So these are our current this year class sizes and sections. And we looked at the median, the section numbers, the medians, across the district. And you can see the sections that are there. So if we were to look at Charles E. Riley, we have 21 sections, and the median is 17. Fitzhugh Park School, 22 sections, the median 17. Frederick Layton School, 14 sections, the median 21. KPS, sections 21, median 20. And then Minetto, sections we have 22, median 17. You go down to bottom per grade level now, you can see the sections in the median. So for our kindergarten students, we have 14 sections, and our median class size is 15. For grade 1, our sections are 16, median class size of 18. Grade 2, sections, 14 sections, median class size is 18. Grade 3, our sections, 14, median class size 19. Grade 4, 14 sections, median class size of 20. Grade 5 section is 14, we have 14 sections, and the median size is 18. And then grade 6, 14 sections, median class size of 21. So in most cases, we are 20 or less currently, and we have one grade level that has median class size of 21, basically, in terms of you get the median across the board. Okay, just wanted to share. That's where we're at right now. And this is the data that we're going to try to work with as we kind of move forward, that we'll come back with at the next board meeting in terms of how do we make it so the class size is either at that limit or a little bit less, right? For at least K through 3. And just to share, when we come back also, I'm going to share some regional data too. We have been doing some research to see how do we compare to others, similar schools like us. And what we've already found out is that we're actually either at where other schools are around us or lower in many cases, okay? All right. I think another piece of important information is student service information as well, because we do have some changes that have occurred across our district, which do come at a cost, a high cost that we want to keep in mind as well. Our goal is to make sure we meet the needs of all of our students. So I'm going to have Lisa, if you can share a little bit about the services that we're providing across the district.
Sure thing. Hi. So we do have 2,698 students supported under Title I. Title I is our federal grant under what would be considered high poverty schools. So you can see there's 5 schools. 2 of them are high school and middle school, so secondary. Within special education, there's 638 students, which represents 18% of our population. Under preschool, we do bucket them separately in special education land. There are 53 students on preschool. We do have 143 students with Section 504 plans. Out-of-district placement students, so those are students who would be supported through special education placed out of our district currently, 22 students. We have 139 McKinney-Vento or homeless children, and 35 English language learners.
Now, just also wanted to share with you, going back to enrollment. So again, we showed you a little bit of how they calculated things in the past as compared to today. So one of the studies from 2012 was done by City BOCES. And in that study, basically what they were looking at was projections in terms of enrollment. And they actually had projected by 2015 that we'd have, anywhere from 38 to 3,900 students. And since, that time, between the years of 2000 to 2012, the average yearly enrollment has declined. It declined during that time frame by 108 students, right, throughout that time period, according to all of the data that was in the study there. Now, since then, there has been, an 11-year period here now, right? And so the projections were enrollment was going to continue to decline. As we look at the studies and what occurred, it has declined. It definitely has. However, the rate of decline is not as sharp as it was, back in this study here. What we see now is that on average, we're still having some, declining per year. The average is 64 student decline since 2012 up until our current time frame. So for us, just to put it into our, what the work that we're doing, the planning, when you have 64 students that are declining, basically that's 3.5 classrooms every year. That's a lot. 3.5 classrooms is certainly, and that's classrooms at a class size of 18. That would be 3.5 classrooms. Okay. Any questions about that, anybody? Yes.
I know you went more years, but just looking at your charts here, because you've highlighted the CRIST chart from 14-15 at 38.47. If you take out our 35.14 this year that you say it's 333, you divide that by the 7 years that encompasses, it's 47 students per year in the last 7 years. So it's a little bit different.
Actually, so Karen did the tabulations. Certainly I can bring that back. But I can certainly ask her about that, and we can make sure we clarify
Yeah,
that.
I
But
just did the math right here. Thank you.
sure, I think what happens is she went from year to year, and then once she had the numbers, she went back and did the average there. So we'll check on the
And
number.
then, I'm
to make
sorry,
sure.
also on our student services, if we have 2,698 Title I students, we have 3,514 students, so there's 816 students in our district that are not Title I, not Title I.
Yes, I'm not sure. Can you share with me more what you're?
The needs, the services that, we have to provide, and I just don't know that,
Yes.
just a notice.
Yeah, we are clear that our service needs are going up across the district, right? We know that as our district continues to diversify, the needs are certainly diversifying as well. And I think the point, if you go back to what I kind of started with, we're in agreement that the needs are diversifying. I think the point that I was trying to share, and I think I said it at the beginning, was there's a cost that certainly we want to keep in mind so that we can definitely be able to meet the needs of all of our students. We have some students who are, they require a really specialized program that's out of district. Some of our students require programs that are in district. And so each year, the cost of those programs, I wish they were going down, but the costs are going up and up and up. And I just think we need to keep that in mind kind of moving forward, basically. With respect to the data, we certainly can come back and share more information on that, and certainly Pam will share that at our next meeting to clarify that. Okay. And just to be clear, even if it were 47, if that number is correct, that's still nearly three. No. The point again is it's still nearly 3 classrooms a year. Okay. In terms of, again, the study from 2012, when you kind of look through this is another study that was done by our BOCES. From September 22, grade 7 through 12, current student enrollment, is 1661. So if you look at what they were projecting, and I gave this to you on another sheet right here, right? It shows the high and the low that they were looking for like 7 through 12, basically. The projections for 22, 23 were at a low level, we'd be at 1801. At a higher level for 7 through 12, we'd have 1878. Our numbers are at 1661, which is nearly 200 lower than what they projected years ago. So I guess the point we're just trying to bring home is just that, some people have said, well, are these projections correct? Were these projections on point? Well, in many cases, we find that yes, they were, but actually the number is significantly lower than or somewhat lower than what we had received from the projections years ago in some of these studies. Okay, all right. Okay, yes, sir.
Thank you, Dr. Calvin. I appreciate you bringing, God, that's loud. Appreciate you bringing all the data to us. And because I am a person who works in data, I recognize that not everybody looks in data in the same exact way. Classic, you have 2 scientists who are going to look at the same exact data set, come up with 2 different hypotheses, 2 different arguments, right? So just to give you a little bit of my thoughts on the data as you presented it here so far. My first one is looking at K through 6 enrollment versus K through 12. Most of what you've presented to us here is K through 12 data, and I would argue for probably more reasons than I can think of, they're different. If for no other greater reason, this conversation in part of the looking at our financial plan has a part of it, the possible repurposing Layton. Not how we're going to use the high school, not how we're going to use the middle school. So a lot of my focus and thought on how I'm looking at this really relates to K through 6. 7 through 12, at some point there are dropout rates. Right? That may affect K through 12 numbers more than they affect K through 6 numbers. So again, there's multiple reasons that I think we really should be kind of focusing our attention on the K through 6 numbers historically. So if that's possible to look at some point, I don't know if you have, I know you don't have it here.
Yeah, well, no, we actually did. When you go back through the slides, these are 4 slides that really kind of focus on elementary.
Sure, and I'm going to talk real quick about like current K through 6, the data that you did present. One thing is, again, talking about projections that you mentioned. Some of the projections like this, they were, the estimates were off. I look at the most recent study here we have from Costello, all right, and they in table 5.2, they did a projection, and as we learned in previous meetings, the projections are based on live birth cohort plus an attrition of that cohort through time, and they use a mathematical calculation to predict what the next class would be. So for this current year, this most recent study we just had done, so this is fresh off the press, Costello predicted that we would have 1,744 students in K through 6. 1,744. You just reported to us that there's 1,853. So that number is obviously much higher than 1,744. So yes, projections can always be wrong, but at least what we're looking at here for real numbers K through 6, the number has actually jumped up this year by more than 100 students in K through 6. So that's my thoughts on the data that we have there. The other one is about our current data for K through 6. Current enrollments. You can look at medians, you can look at averages. What I have been talking about in open meetings is looking at trying to get classes less than 19. I know we can't be perfect because of cohorts and everything, but I think it's a good thing to be shooting for. So if I look at the classes that are 20 or above currently, this year, right now, K through 3, 17 of the 58 sections, that's 29% of K through 3 classes have 20 or more students. So the median may be 19, but there are a fair number, again, 29% that are above. When you incorporate the 4 through 6, whose number is at 50%, the total of K through 6 of classrooms is 38 out of 100. That's 38% of the classrooms have 20 or more students. So again, I do appreciate all the up-to-date data, but just when looking at it, I try to look at it not just as averages, mediums, but do that in conjunction with other ways of looking at it, some of which, again, I believe in smaller class size. That's how I viewed the data as you presented it, as an additional piece of information.
So I appreciate your feedback. Lisa, you want to share something?
Well, I just wanted to say, I think we have to be very careful about moving the goalpost because what's in the contract is 25, and when we asked them to look at this, it was for classes of 20 or lower, not really classes that are 18, right, or lower.
Actually, what the board said at the last time was where we're currently at, that would be the plateau, that would be the threshold, excuse me, is that the word? That would be the threshold, right? And then try to meet where we're at, right, or better, right? So.
Right, but I think even with that, we need to be, I think it makes more sense to look at averages. So we, for example, we've got 6 kindergarten sections that have 14 or 15 kids in them, right? Which, we could, you could imagine, you would split those up and you would still be at 18.
Right.
Right, so I think we need to be careful that, I don't want us to say, well, it's currently 15 at Riley, so we need to make sure it's 15 or fewer at Riley. Right, we don't want to take these and institutionalize these class numbers moving forward. So yeah, I just wanted to, you were clear last time about because you gave that number last time about 29%, but I think if we're going to say it should be 18, then we should decide it's 18. If we say it's 20, we should have that as the threshold. Because I think one of the things that comes across in the previous studies is that configurations matter much less than quality instruction. So.
And I would just say that when we come back at the next meeting, we're going to share with you regional data as well, just so you can see how we compare to others. I think what you're going to see in the regional data, is this on? I'm sorry, can you hear me okay? I think what you're going to see in the regional data is, again, we are either at or lower than most people who are around us. We'll share it and compare it and kind of look at it. Just to be clear, none of us want to see class sizes raise, and be, not, most of us who are here, I think most of us have been teachers. We've been in classrooms, so we're not looking to raise class sizes out of, control and cause, that would not help anybody, right? You see the needs of our students, like Pam just pointed out, 77% of our students have Title I needs. That means they're getting reading or math or some kind of support or service. So we want to be careful with how we staff our classrooms. The point of this report, and you're correct, we can see data through different lenses, right? The point of the report is to share with you where we're at today, what do we see right now in our schools, and also to share that this problem has been a long-standing problem. It isn't something that's new. We have some people who do think and have shared with me, where it's come from. Well, we've had years of looking at this and studying it and thinking about it and thinking it through. So wherever we go from this point on, all these factors I think are important, and we want to share them as transparently and openly as we can. Okay? All right. Any other thoughts from the board? Anybody else? Okay. Okay, very good. All right. So we do also want to share tonight thought exchange. We had a thought exchange that went out to the public, and we had reminders. We also had postcards that were delivered to mailboxes to encourage people to get involved. We have results back today. So we were going to share that information. And you can tell me when to turn, or I can hand it to you. You can turn. Your choice. Okay, here we go. Amanda will share the thought exchange information.
Good evening. So Thought Exchange is a new platform to the district, and it is it's a data and input gathering tool more than it is a survey tool in the traditional sense. Essentially what the platform does, it poses a singular open-ended question for participants and asks them to express their thoughts on that particular question, rather than offering answers to participants as a traditional survey does. The exception to that is that the survey always does begin with a couple of short survey questions. Those are developed by whoever the user of the platform is. So in this particular case, we asked participants 6 survey questions, one about their role in the district, and then we also asked them to rate their priority for the 5 recommendations made in the efficiency study. But the broad open-ended question that we asked participants to consider is to provide your feedback on any or all of the 5 recommendations that were outlined in the 4-part part of the district's comprehensive efficiency study, thank you, including the potential of repurposing Frederick Layton Elementary School. So we're going to share with you a sampling of the data that we took from the platform, certainly not all of the data in its entirety. As we were just saying, you can look at data in a number of ways. The initial data that we get from the platform is that we had 402 participants in this exchange with 308 thoughts. Once people post a thought, then they are directed to or requested to rate the thoughts of other people who had posted thoughts to the platform. And so we actually had 8,540 ratings, which gave us just over 20 ratings per participant. What we had asked folks to do is to offer a thought and then rate the thoughts of at least 10 other participants. And so just the number of ratings, 21.2 per participant, sort of suggests that people were invested in reading through the thoughts of others and rating more than we had asked them to do. So we had a ratings ratio of 28, meaning we had the number of ratings per the number of thoughts. So as we said, you can look at data in a number of different ways. So the initial data is that we had 402 participants in this particular exchange. That does not mean that we had 402 people offer us individual thoughts. So this is the actual breakdown of how the thoughts sort of panned out. 191 of the people who participated offered a thought to us, or I should say, we'll look at more data, offered thoughts. because people can offer more than one thought. 210 of the participants rated other thoughts, and so we had a number of people who read through others' thoughts but declined the opportunity to pose a thought themselves. And then we had 199 participants who explored other people's thoughts. So the concept that we had 400 participants is very different than what that participation actually looked like. As I understand, and as I said, the platform is new to Oswego, but as I understand the platform, the 199 participants who explored thoughts answered the survey questions, but didn't necessarily pose a thought themselves or rate other thoughts. So they were counted as participant, but didn't offer us their individual thoughts themselves. Sure. Yes.
So do they count again in like the 191 shared a thought? But then if they went in and then just looked and didn't rate anybody, are they counted in the 199?
So
Left and then came back and then looked?
I think I talk about that data a little bit further down the road in terms of, yes, but people did. And if you read the thoughts, it does become evident that some of them are authored by the same individual. So there is, and it's just really the format of the response. Some folks, for example, at least one individual read through the entire report and then referenced the recommendations with recommendation number 1, recommendation number 14, suggesting that is the same author.
That's kind of nice that someone spent that much time.
Yes?
That's awesome.
Yes, yes. Sure. So one of the initial survey question that we asked participants to answer was what their role is in the district, and we offered 4 responses here. Whether or not participants were a parent of a current student in the district, a parent of a former student in the district, a community member without current or former students in the district, or an employee of the district. And participants could check multiple boxes because you may be an employee of the district who has current students. You may be an employee of the district who has former students. You may be a parent who has a current student and a former student in the district. So you'll see that our numbers here add up to far more than our participants because we allowed that, people to answer in more than one way. So as I said, we asked people to rate their priority for the 5 recommendations that are made in the efficiency study. And so this are just the priority of the recommendations in order. So you'll see that in terms of updating annual enrollment projections, that is a high or a medium priority for the majority of the district, 89% of the participants.
Maybe we can just tap the board mic. Kind of froze up under there. So we were on slide number.
I believe we want slide 33. Yes.
The joys of technology. So you all have a packet in front of you with the presentation, so maybe we can just go from the packet. Is that all right?
Can I borrow your
Sorry
packet?
about that.
Because I didn't print the new one. Thank you.
Okay.
Okay, so the next survey question that we asked folks to rate priority on was the repurposing of Layton. This slide is interesting because there is just shy of an even split between folks who rated this a high priority recommendation versus a low priority recommendation. And then, obviously 20% of our participants fell in the middle. Rating the development of a facilities planning team whose role it will be to develop and monitor a long-term plan for the district in terms of facilities. Again, similar to our first recommendation, 11% of the participants rated this as a low priority, with the majority of participants feeling that this is a good idea. Similarly, in terms of engaging the community and our architect in planning and discussing facility needs and options sooner rather than later, only 11% of our participants rated this as a low priority, with the rest of our participants indicating medium or high priority. And then the last recommendation is whether or not the district should thoughtfully consider the fiscal implications of any potential capital project related to existing debt service. And overwhelmingly, with only 5% of our participants rating this as a low priority, people thought that this was also a good idea. So this is what Thought Exchange terms a word cloud, and there are other platforms that produce similar graphics for us. This particular graphic is representative of the number of keywords as they are calculated or represented in participant responses. The larger the word, the more frequently it is used in participants' responses. The smaller the word, then it appears, that term or word appears less frequently in participant responses. But of course, as we want to be careful with data, that's not necessarily representative of how participants rated thoughts that had those terms in them. The next few slides are really designed to, I think, highlight what the platform is intended to do. So the next few thoughts are going to give us some themes that ran throughout some of the participants' comments. And then it shows us the rating that each of those comments received from participants. This first slide is the overall sort of summary slide, and it ranks for us comments 1, 2, and 3 of the comments and where those fall. The rest of the slides that we're going to look at in a minute are not necessarily order ranked, but do show you what the average rating is for each of those. So the initial key thoughts that were most highly rated from participants regarding, and I'm not going to read these all to you, but the first regards smaller class sizes being the priority and providing teachers the ability to engage and assist students in smaller class sizes. The second and third most highly ranked commentary had to do with hiring of new personnel and concern over whether or not those expenditures would have an impact on our ability in the long run to reduce class sizes. So then the next couple of slides represent common themes that were represented by our participants. So these thoughts all are around class size and expressions or thoughts from participants about the potential or the impact on class sizes. The number of participants who offered a rating is in parentheses to the side, so you can see that 38, 31, and 38 participants offered rating on these comments. The next theme that the algorithm identified had to do with enrollment. And a lot of these are very similar in nature. In fact, some of the comments are repeated because of the terminology in the comments, and so the algorithm picked them up in multiple categories. This theme shifted a little bit from the concept of class size and enrollment to the district having a plan in terms of future planning regarding the district's finances being a high priority, and then how we would plan to get students back on track after COVID, And then repurposing of Layton in terms of, there's been a lot of information that I know that explains, there has not been a lot of information. And that was also a resounding theme, folks interested in knowing that if we were to go down that path, what are the plans for Layton? There were a handful of comments that sort of posed that question, and people expressing the need for wanting more information before they really would and express an opinion one way or another. Then there were a handful of thoughts on redistricting in general. Concern you'll see in this first comment, rated by 37 participants, that concern that the district may have to redistrict again later at some point. A second thought, thinking that rather than closing Layton, that the interdistrict should be redistricted. And again, the last comment is one of those that I just referred to in terms of the participant wanting more information about what would happen with Layton and the redistricting plan before making any specific comment. So then the platform also offers a comparison between comments that seem to appear on one side of an issue versus the other side of the issue, and then comments that fall somewhere in the middle, or participants that fall in the middle. So in terms of closing Layton, the platform, the algorithm identified sort of 101 participants whose comment on side A. If you look at the comments on side A, I don't think closing an elementary school in a district permanently is a smart idea. I believe closing Layton would be a big mistake. So those 101 participants in blue fell on the A side in terms of that opinion. And what it showed is that participants also in the blue, if you notice the star ratings underneath those two comments. So what those numbers indicate to us is that people who fell in the blue in side A also rated the comments that fell into side A at a rate of 4.7 and 4.8. Conversely, folks who fell on side B, you'll see that the top comment there, the enrollment is not as high as it has been in previous years, so closing Layton seems like the best option. Folks who fell in the green rated that comment at a rate of 4.7, but folks in the blue only rated that comment 1.2. And so it's showing you sort of where people's opinions and ratings fall on either side of the issue. And then our participants in the middle, you'll see that folks in blue rated that first comment in the side AB column with a 5, and folks on the green side rated that comment with a 4.1. And so those are comments that both sides, people apparently on one side of the issue or the other, had in common, and same with the comment below that. So this was just another difference comparison. The key term picked up in these comments had to do with declining enrollment, but this data is the same idea. 83 of our participants fell on side A, with 19 participants falling on side B. These comments are a little bit different. These are, I think, less divisive than previous comments. For example, the side A comment here is, why are the other city schools only being considered for absorbing Layton students rather than Minetto? And repurposing Layton, again, questioning for what purpose. So these folks aren't necessarily on one side of the issue regarding repurposing Layton or not, but have additional questions. And the same thing for side B. There has been a recommended, studied need to close a school for 20 years. It's a tough decision to make, but taxpayers deserve it. So, the comments vary there, and then again, we have a series of comments that are commonly rated in the middle. Similar data here in terms of the key word in this comparison has more to do with space. Side A folks referencing extra space in buildings for specialized programming. Side B folks referencing the gymnasium as a space needed to be used for varsity athletic teams to practice and complete. So again, not necessarily guidance one way or the other, but expressing thoughts as we ask them to do on repurposing the facilities and other recommendations.
So in terms of summary,
In terms of an overall summary, I would say that the comments that we had from folks were really wide-ranging. We had some folks who commented about the current status of the culture in their schools, some folks expressing concern about bullying and other behaviors in school that we hadn't really asked about. For a chunk of responses that just sort of said none or NA. I think those folks probably rated other people's thoughts, but didn't necessarily express their own. Some concerns that the algorithm didn't pick up, or that there is actually a lot more data than we're sharing with you. This is condensed. Questions about transportation and how transportation would be readjusted to meet the needs of all students. So really a wide range of feedback from participants. I don't know necessarily specific to guiding your decision one way or another, but we can make all of the data accessible to you if you're interested.
we actually have copies.
Yes, yep.
actually have
We actually made you copies of all of the comments for anyone who would like it.
Comment, okay? And our goal is to make sure that we put this presentation up on the website. I'm sorry, Matt, there we go. Sorry, can you hear me now? Our goal is to make sure, we want to make sure we're transparent, so we're going to definitely take the presentation, put it up, the information up, so that everybody can see what was said across the community. Does that make sense to everybody? Okay, all right. So that's where we're at in terms of the thought exchange. The next piece of information in terms of gathering feedback from the community is the community focus group. It's coming on the 15th. We have a day there here at the high school, and if there are people watching, we certainly want to encourage you. If you would like to become a part of that focus group, send in the information, and we will go from there. We'll get back to you right away as possible. So just wanted to share that is upcoming. Okay? All right. All right, so as we shared, that's the information that we were going to be sharing this evening. We've kind of gone down each of those pieces. We will come back at the next meeting to share the next pieces of information, and we'll kind of go from there, basically. All right, the only other thing that we have tonight, separate from this, just as in terms of the funding of reserves, you have received a document, a couple of things. So one, the preliminary audit results from this year are showing an approximate surplus. It should say actually $4.8 million. My apologies. Not 4.5. As of yesterday, it was 4.5. But this morning, there was the auditor after our meeting last night, our audit committee meeting, recognized that there was an area that was calculated wrong, and so it's now 4.8 million. The surplus is really due to two key factors: the increase in state aid, foundation aid, and federal ARP and ESSER funds, which have been going to, support general fund expenditures, causing the budget, some of those areas having to not be spent. So the budget was underspent. This amount is not unusual in the current environment due to ARP and ESSER funding and additional state aid. If you recall, we've had a couple of our folks our auditors talking about the ARP and ESSER funds and supplementing some of the programs that you would have had normally in your budget. So we will need to retroactively fund the reserves, or the district will be over that 4% limit. And we have a certain time frame. We have to make sure this is done by October 15th, I think is the date, Nancy, if I'm correct, by law. The district has recommended some flexible funding options there. And please keep in mind that the new reserve opportunities that the board might want to create, with voter approval, there's some things, if you recall, Rick Timms was shared his portion of the study that we may want to be thinking about in the future. So tonight's recommendation provides a temporary holding and flexibility until we can figure out where you want to go, basically. But those are our recommendations, and we're open to your feedback as a board if there's any questions or concerns. Everybody okay? Okay. Well, I want to thank you for your time this evening. I'll definitely do due diligence and check the number piece that you shared, and we'll bring that back at the next meeting. And thank you for your time this evening. Much appreciated. And thank you all for your work.
Thank you, guys.
Next on the agenda is the consent agenda, items A and B. If I could have a motion, please.
I'll move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is curriculum with Amanda or Lisa?
Item A is NISMA All-State Unfiltered, as presented.
Okay. Items A, if I could have a motion, please.
Make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item B, combining athletic contracts, that's the girls varsity ice hockey, as presented.
Motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? Next is personnel with Robert Syracuse.
Hi, we have, under item A, professional staff recommendation for retirement as presented.
Could I have a motion, please?
I'll move it.
Second?
Second it.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next, we have a professional staff recommendation for a resignation as presented.
Items B, could I have a motion, please?
Move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Next, we have another professional staff recommendation for teacher tenure as presented.
Item C, motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
We have item D, professional staff recommendation for a leave of absence as presented.
Item D, motion, please.
Make the motion.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item E, professional staff recommendation for probationary teaching assistant as presented.
Item E, motion. Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Items F, G, and H are extra compensatory positions as presented.
Items F through H, motion, please.
Move it.
Second?
I'll second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Items I through K are support staff recommendations as presented.
Items I through K, motion, please.
I'll move it.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
And lastly, item L, substitute and temporary employees, as presented.
Item L, motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next is Finance with Nancy Squires.
Items A through D are the annual assessment rolls, tax rate establishment, and the tax roll warrant for the 22-23 school year as presented. And in addition to this, Karen will be passing around the warrant for the board signature.
Items A through D, if I could have a motion, please.
Move it.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
I just have a question, Nancy. Is the reason the school tax bills just are coming out to our residents is because we had to get these numbers first? Is that correct?
Yes.
Thanks.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Item E is the 2023-2024 budget calendar as presented.
Item E, could I have a motion, please?
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Items F through H are contracts as presented.
Items F through H, motion, please.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Items I through J are MOAs as presented.
Items I through J, motion, please.
Move it.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion? All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed?
Nancy, for the funding of the reserves, can you move those all together so that we can have a discussion about all of the recommended allocations?
Certainly.
Thanks.
Items K through O, funding of reserves as presented.
Items K through O, motion.
I'll make the motion.
Second?
Second.
Any discussion?
Yes. So actually, before, I know Jim has a question, but Mathis, if in the presentation you talked about the putting things into sort of flexible, thank you, flexible reserves so that we could, like threshold was what came to mind, flexible reserves, so that we can move it in the, because if we create any new reserves, they have to be approved by the voters.
Correct.
So, certain ones, right. So I know that in the past, we've looked into setting up a nuclear reserve, which we have some challenges with because of the structure of the pilot. It depends on that. But what other reserves? There was another one that that would be possible for us to set up that Mr. Timms, I think, had mentioned.
Yes, so he talked, sorry, and Nancy, help me if I'm wrong. He talked about having an equipment reserve, particularly for like, I don't know, tractors, machines, plows and those kinds of things. That was one of them. And other ones that you can remember, can you help me? I can't
He
remember.
talked about the equipment reserve for just equipment, vehicles,
Yes,
and a reserve for repairs.
yes, in case something big comes down the line.
And so, just so I understand, the vehicle reserve, part of that would be if we don't want to go out and bond for school buses, right? We would use the vehicle reserve, we could use the vehicle reserve for that if we
Correct, you
don't
can
have-
use it for that, or you can use it for other district vehicles.
Okay. Okay. All right.
Any other discussion?
Yeah, I have some thoughts to share. And it's kind of basically the same thing I spoke of last year. So for those of you who were here last year, sorry for the repeat. But it goes more to a general philosophy account how I view money, how we get money from the taxpayers, how we build budgets. So when we build budgets every year, the taxpayers are informed. We have a budget meeting. They get to vote on the budget. And we really openly say, this is where all of your money is being spent. And every year, because we must, we pad a little bit in there. And it's necessary because, as I've learned, if we go over, there's a big penalty. Like, you don't want to go over. So it is healthy to build a bit in, right? And the nice thing about the reserves is that we have the ability, when we do have unappropriated fund balance, when we have a little bit of reserve, we can squirrel that money away for later. I will say, though, and as I've distributed to the board members, when you look at some of our reserve funds, while they have been used in the past, the overall monetary amount has not gone down, it's only gone up. So while they're kind of, some of them can be used as flex funds or rainy day funds, they historically have not been. And when they have, like when we bought a laptop for everybody in the district, we were able to replenish that money with reserves from a previous year, with unappropriated fund balance from the previous year. So that really kind of stayed static. So if you look at our reserve funds over time, they're pretty much the same, or in the last couple of years, they've really been growing. Also with those reserve funds, some of these funds we actually fund on a yearly basis through line items, right? So our teachers' retirement, our ERS, our workers' comp, our unemployment. We fund that every year through a budget item, and yes, they are, again, rainy day funds, but with the amount that we budget in and the history of it, I believe there's far more than enough money in those to serve at least their stated purpose. Now, the unstated purpose for some of them, yes, they're a flex fund. But I would also argue that we probably have enough money for that as well. I would really like to see us put this all in the capital reserve, and for one main reason of, this is money, again, as we start the budget process, we say how we're going to spend it. The taxpayers agree to that. But then we don't spend it all. By putting into the capital reserve, we do a couple things. One, we're investing in our infrastructure for the future. For those of us who walked around the buildings, I think, at least I strongly believe, we're going to need not one, but probably two more capital projects, if not the same size as the one we're doing, but combined probably bigger, right? We need to really start saving money for that now. So one is it's an investment in our infrastructure. Secondly, this is more philosophically, it puts the money back in the voters' hands. Like when we originally asked for it, when we did the budget workshop and they agreed upon it, the capital reserve fund needs to be voted on by the public. So by putting this public money back into that capital, it allows us to not only invest in our future, but also to have the public being able to have a solid say in how that money's spent. So as I go back 2 years ago to Mr. Zuber, when he came and talked for those of us who were in the high school cafeteria, the overarching message, which is frustrating to me because I'm somebody who wants to be told, what are reasonable levels for these funds, right? School districts been working for years with these funds. What would you consider a reasonable level? The only thing Mr. Zuber came back with and said, it's what you feel comfortable with. It's what the board is comfortable with moving forward based on your information, what you have, and where you think we're going. So while we can't fund the nuke plant right now because there's logistics, we couldn't put a penny of this into that nuke fund if we wanted to, right? Equipment reserve, other things that we haven't established yet, ideas. But again, as I did last year, I would like to put forth a motion, all right, that to amend I'd like to move to amend that we use the totality of the unappropriated fund balance of $4.8 million to the capital reserve fund. So that's my motion to amend.
Yeah. So we have a motion to amend. We need a second if we want to discuss that motion. Does anyone second that motion? Okay. So, discussion. I think Jim already.
Yeah, I've said my piece. I've got a couple more things, but I'm.
I just want to say, Jim, I appreciate where you're coming from. I just don't want to handcuff ourselves for the future. If we do it there, it's locked there. And I appreciate every aspect of what you said, but with the distribution around that we're doing and still putting some into there, we are being responsible towards that, but we're being flexible for any unforeseen thing. And the other thing that I remember with Mr. Timms talking was about looking forward to when we have the potential fiscal cliff. And having that money sitting there, again, it can be moved into capital at any time. We have that flexibility. We need it, we move it over there. But I myself prefer philosophically having flexibility within that.
Jim, we also know it's been all over the news, TRS, ERS, those rates are going to skyrocket on us, I'm afraid. I don't think we can ignore not putting something into those accounts also.
Go ahead.
May I say something? I think the word that you used was flexibility. I think, just from my perspective, as flexible as you possibly can, I think would be best. Maybe what you want to do is take some time. We can bring Dr. Timms back, right, and do some discussion about where you might want to actually end up at. But I think at this point, and certainly it's up to the board, I'm not trying to tell the board what to do, but my recommendation would be as much flexibility as possible, because who knows what will come in the future? Who knows what will happen down the line? So while you have the extra, right now you put it, the recommendation is to put it in a couple different zones or areas, right? But it leaves you there with some flexibility. Nancy, did you want to add anything else to that?
Just that we really do need to make a decision tonight, because that really has to go back to the auditors so they can finalize the draft reports.
Thank you.
So I guess my feeling on the motion is or the motion to amend, is I would vote against it just because I'm also in favor of flexibility, but I think it's also incumbent on all of us to remember that we need to set up some of those other additional reserves and actually do it, and then we can have finance, or we can ask Nancy to write up a journal transfer. I don't know that we need the auditors. Do we need the auditors to do that? Okay, then we can ask you to, okay, we put such and such into unemployment. Can you please reallocate it to these? And we can do that within this, I believe we can do that within this academic year, but after we have voters approve those funds.
So what would need to happen is the voters would have to actually approve the creation of those reserve funds, and then they would actually have to approve the transfer of the money into those reserves, I believe.
Voters would have to approve that. So we would have to have this ready by April, well, yeah. Okay, for the May, ready for the May vote.
Correct. It would have to be in the budget newsletter to the taxpayers.
Okay.
Nancy would also establish the limit on that fund as well? Or-
Yes.
Yeah, okay, so we get all that.
Okay. Any other discussion on the motion to amend?
I was just going to say, Jim, that would give us some time if we wanted to bring some experts in, because I know you were frustrated a couple of years ago that you wanted some expert opinion on, so what should the reserve, a healthy reserve look like? So between now and then, we would have time to bring somebody in, give us some advice, establish the reserves we want to establish, and then figure out how much is a good amount put in.
It would be interesting to have that person come in, because Mr. Zuber was pretty clear, I think, said, no, it's up to you. And when I
It
spoke,
has to be Tim's.
oh, Tim's, okay.
Yeah.
When I spoke with somebody at the New York State Board, I asked the same question to them. They're like, can't tell you, there's nothing. So I got to just leave with this, and, Pam, I appreciate you talking about TRS. That's one of the budgeted line items, right? So last year, we budgeted 3.26 mil. This year, we went from 3.26 to 3.48. So we increased that 220 grand probably because of that. That TRS reserve account has 1.17 mil. So, we're talking about a lot of money in something, even if there's a 2, 5, or 10% blip on TRS that we didn't say, we've got 20 times that amount of money in the reserve account to cover that. So again, I do appreciate that, but that's there. And Tom, I do remember the fiscal cliff, And I specifically asked Mr. Timms, when you talk about a cliff, I'm thinking about falling off. He really meant a fiscal plateau, where our amount of state aid is going to go up and is going to go up and is going to then plateau. And he kept referring to that as the fiscal cliff. It's not. It's a plateau of new money that we'll be getting over the years. It's not something that we're going to all of a sudden have a drop in.
Can I just share one thing? So this is, yeah, I hear you, Jim, loud and clear. I just think, when you think of fiscal cliff, right? So last night we had the audit committee meeting. And as a part of that committee, they talked about our liabilities, right? In terms of what are the things that are out there that we have to still pay on. We have a health insurance piece, liability that's, was it $270 million? That is high. We're in the top 5% of districts who have that type of a liability, what you owe people down the line, right? So I understand exactly what you're saying, but I just think, as you think about reserves, so reserves are not a bad thing, right? They're there to help you when something goes wrong. And when you think about your liabilities, right, it's not just capital improvement. There are other things. In the top 5% of people across the state with that kind of a liability, you really need to, my opinion is, just my opinion, having been a superintendent for a number of years, you need to at least try to put things aside, flexible in case something goes wrong with that. We've just come through a pandemic. We're still working through it. We don't know what, where, and how. So, again, I would encourage flexibility. You wanted to say something?
In addition to the fiscal cliff conversation,
Right.
Rick Timms also commented that we have the federal ARP funds and the
ESSER funds,
federal
all
ESSER
leaving.
2 funds that will be going away.
So, I mean, that's what, $8 million or so that we would need to,
12.
$12 million that we need to kind of just think about a year or so from now. So I would just encourage you to keep your options open and flexible wherever you possibly can. Respectfully submitted. Thank you.
I also want to remind us all, electric buses it's down the road. We're going to have to do a lot of infrastructure work. Dave, am I wrong? I'm not wrong. There's going to have to be a lot of work done for us to accommodate electric buses, as well as every district. But it's in the future, and we have to be mindful of that also.
All right, so I think, is there any further discussion on the motion to amend? Okay, so let's move to a vote on the motion to amend. Is everyone clear on what we're voting on?
I think so.
Yeah, motion to amend that all of the reserve, all of the unallocated funds would go to the capital reserve. Okay. Do we want to do a roll call, or can we do, or do you have a preference? Okay, so let's just do group. All in favor of amending the motion? Opposed?
Opposed.
Opposed? Aye.
Thank you, Jim. It's an important point, and I think it's good to have this discussion. Right, well, I mean, I think actually we have this year, right? I mean, like, this is what we need to figure out this year. So, okay, I think we can take still K through
K through O.
O.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? Next on the agenda is the student representative discussion with Maura Dempsey.
Hello, everybody. So I have a few things to talk about tonight. So the first being the high school has their Spirit Week next week. They also have their homecoming football game, their homecoming dance, and their pep rally, I believe that's it. There's a lot going on. But everyone's very excited for the pep rally because we get to do some things that we haven't gotten to do in a few years due to COVID. We also, our Spirit Week days are going to be color wars, so every grade is going to wear a different color. And then we have bikers versus surfers, so we're going to do, the juniors and the seniors are going to be surfers, and the sophomores and the freshmen are going to be bikers. And then we also have our Buck Blue Day, which will be Friday. and Dress as Your Favorite Character Day, which will be Tuesday. The second thing that I'd like to talk about is there's a lot of technology issues right now with the Chromebooks, but the IT department is doing very good with those things. I did talk with Mr. Lanigan about them, and he's going to try and get those things in order. I've also talked with the librarians a few times and met them, and they're going to create a little suggestion box for all the issues that are going on so I can better understand what those problems are and talk to you guys about them if you'd be interested in hearing those things. And then the final thing is, as Dr. Calvin mentioned earlier, we had Rachel's Challenge last week, and that was a very big thing for students. It was very empowering. I know a lot of students loved it, and I've been hearing a lot of positive things. I unfortunately wasn't able to go to those 2 days, but I got the opportunity to take pictures for yearbook, and it was amazing to be there and to see everything that they were doing. And I think that it would be a cool thing to maybe try again in the spring for the students that weren't able to participate in those days or had to miss them for certain reasons.
Thank you. Next on the agenda is items from the board. Would
I'm not sure if
anybody-
you missed, but isn't there a buck parade too? I think on the 15th?
Yeah, I'm pretty sure that's the same day as homecoming.
Okay.
What is it?
It's the 12th. I have it for the 12th.
So the 12th?
Oh, yeah. And then there's also the Buck Bowl, which I think is Powder Puff again then this year. So.
Any items from the board?
No, thanks. As always, we appreciate our faculty, our staff, our administrators, the people who show up every day and do their jobs 110%, which is everybody here. Thank you all. We can't do this without all of you.
Any other board members? Next is the executive session. Would there be a need for an executive session?
Yes,
Reason?
to discuss the work performance of a particular employee.
Would you need a vote after?
No.
Okay. Lisa? Were you gonna say-
I was going to repeat what he said because he
Oh,
didn't have his
okay.
mic on, but you heard him.
All in favor?
Aye.
Opposed? You may move to executive session.
Oh, I thought,
Motion to go into executive.
I'm sorry?
oh, we did that
Oh,
already,
I'm sorry. Motion? Did I take?
Oh,
I'm sorry. Motion?
Motion.
Thank you. Second?
I'll second.
All in favor?
Aye.
Aye.
Opposed? You may move to executive session.